you can get a medical DQ if somebody, like, say, looked at my feet and said, you got to stop, and we're making you stop. They'll pull your tag and you're done. And so I didn't want that to happen. So I didn't look at them. So that way I didn't know, right? I'm like, okay, they hurt. Yeah, but you're going to hurt in an Ironman. So I just kept going and I kept running. And when I finished, I knew that there was an issue. So I just went, because if I sat down before the medical tent, then they'd have to carry me to it because I didn't have anything left. So.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the weekly episode of the Mayn Idea podcast, where today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Hudson Maynard. Hudson is a two-time Ironman finisher, top 115 global male CrossFit Games competitor for the 55 to 59 age class, and DEKA World Qualifier for DEKA Fit, DEKA Strong, and the DEKA Mile disciplines. He's no stranger to uncharted waters, as Hudson spent his formative years sailing around the world on a boat built by his father, my grandfather, from 1972 to 1978. When you think of a person in their 50s, you probably don't think of someone capable and willing to push themselves to the peak of their anaerobic threshold, then stay there in order to edge out the closest competitor. But that's my dad, and it explains a lot about who I am. I love this conversation, and I really appreciate how my dad can break down the mental battle that happens through fitness while demonstrating a love and appreciation for everyone on their journey to better understanding their own health, regardless of what their starting point is. I hope this conversation inspires more people to see age as an opportunity and not as a limiting factor. If we can win the battle upstairs, much of what's ahead of us can be overcome. Without further ado, Hudson Maynard. Well, you're officially the first repeat offender on the show. So thanks for coming back. You weren't scarred enough the first time, so thanks coming back and doing this again.
Yeah, that's fine. It's good to be here. This is I had a really good time last time. It was really enjoyable, and we traded a lot of great blows, and we're back for more. So this will be good.
I have a pretty good idea of where it's going to go because there's some cool stuff to talk about, and I think that it warranted an episode, maybe because of the reach of how many different people don't know about what we're going to talk about just because they haven't heard of it, like I hadn't, and the avenue that it provides people to kind of gamify their fitness and wellness and put it in this really cool space. So you have a history as a hard worker. I mean, for starters, I don't know many days that you take just rest in general, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But you also have a history with endurance sports. So you had done 2 Ironmans in your 30s, 3 Ironmans.
2. One in my 30s, one in my 40s.
And where were they for those listening? And then what kind of led you to decide that you were going to do that? Because that's quite a feat, and it's a massive step up from just doing triathlons.
Well, okay, so we'll peel it back a little bit to the beginning. So grew up on a sailboat, and so swimming was in my life. So I swam through high school and got out of high school, and I've always been kind of an active kid and wanted to continue sport. So I did triathlons. I like the individual sports, me against the clock kind of thing. Having grown up on a boat, I didn't get the team sports, the football, the baseball, the soccer, because we were constantly moving around. We sailed around the world for 6 years, so we were always in different countries, and I didn't have that kind of like staying in one place kind of setup where I could do team sports. So solo things attracted me, and triathlon. I liked bicycling, and I had swum. I hated running. I still hate running, but I do it, and I've done it long enough that I'm okay at it now.
Yeah.
But so out of the shorter triathlons, where are you going to go? You just I like challenges, and so what's the top of the Hawaiian Ironman is obviously the biggest and the best, but that's pretty expensive, and you need to qualify, and so that requires a huge commitment. And I was raising kids, but I wanted to at least do the distances. which is 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and a full marathon, 26.2 miles. And I did I was living in Colorado for both of them, so my training was there. And I did one in Lake Placid, New York, and one in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. One in my 30s, one in my 40s. I'm 57 now, and I got 3 years to go, and I'm not going to do one in my 50s.
Yeah, the
been there,
next
done
question
that.
was,
Yeah.
was there any,
I mean,
when you did those, like, I feel like the Ironman distance is just, it's such a grind. You can't do that. You can do a marathon if you just get run volume in. Like if you just train enough of the hours, you can do it. There's people that walk marathons, right? So you can get through the distance. You can't really just stumble into an Ironman. I mean, from a overuse injury potential and just the time that you actually have to put into preparing for it, you're committing to quite a bit of time. I mean, when you did Lake Placid and Coeur d'Alene, your training frequency on top of a full-time job and kids it's nuts. Like, it's a pretty big commitment, right? So you knew when you were done with the second one, not sidebar, that you had a blood blister on your foot from the second mile into the marathon. So you finished with a shoe full of blood. I remember that.
both feet.
Both feet.
Because it was so hot on the bike in Coeur d'Alene. Yeah, they're on the balls of my feet. But your body takes care of things like that. It sort of gives you different hormones and adrenal stuff that gets you through. And as long as you have the mindset to attach the mindset to what your body's giving you, so you can get through those painful spots. Some people just pull over and go, I'm done.
Let's touch on this for a sec, because this was actually kind of wild. I kind of spaced on this before we started talking about it. But I remember, because when I was standing in the finish line in Coeur d'Alene, I was waiting for you to come by, because you're allowed to stand and then finish with your family member. So if you're a non-competitor, you can see your parent or your relative or whatever coming down and then join them, so you jump across the finish line together. So I was waiting for you to come, and I think you had planned to do it in like 11:40, and we were well over the 12-hour mark. You were so far off your pacing, it just didn't make sense. And there's always concern there from a health standpoint, right? Because it's hot, it's the middle of the day, it's long, and no one knows exactly how their body's going to respond to this kind of stimulus, even when you train. Right. There's pro athletes that go out there and they have seizures, right? I mean, stuff just happens. Right. So, and
nutrition on long events like that, nutrition becomes such a critical component, because if you don't fuel yourself, you're going to, die on the vine long before the event's done. So there's during the event, nutrition that's critical. A lot of shorter things, you can fuel up beforehand, carbo load, or do whatever you got to do and have your special foods and do your race. But the Ironman, you have to do all of that, and then you have to fuel all throughout the race, or you're not going to make it.
But this was strange, because this wasn't even like a preparation issue. You had done all the training volume, you had put in all the time, and then, like I was saying, you were so far off your pacing that there was concern. And then when I saw you, you were just white-faced. You were in that mode where your brain was so far overcoming this problem that we didn't know what it was yet. That you were just committed to getting to the finish line and doing it. And you ran right past us, and you ran right to the medical tent. And so we're like, shit, what's going on? And we go over there, and your shoes were literally red with blood. And you got the blood blisters on the third mile?
On the bike.
So you weren't even in the run.
Because, well, that's what's next. So you do it. Right. But the bike, it was so hot, like it was 100 degrees or something in Coeur d'Alene. It's a pretty flat course, should have been really fast. I was pretty excited about it, because my previous one was in New York and it was really hilly. So I thought, this is potential for a PR and this could go really well. But I've learned in the years and the decades of being an athlete that the heat, I don't do super well in the heat. It's a whole different prep and different type of effort and maintenance of myself during events when it's hot. And so I just knew I had an issue, but I didn't want to look at my feet, because you can get a DQ if you pull over, and you can get a medical DQ if somebody, say, looked at my feet and said, you got to stop, and we're making you stop. They'll pull your tag and you're done. Right. And so I didn't want that to happen. So I didn't look at them. So that way I didn't know, right? I'm like, okay, they hurt. Yeah, but you're going to hurt in an Ironman. So I just kept going, and I kept running. And when I finished, I knew that there was an issue. So I just went, because if I sat down before the medical tent, then they'd have to carry me to it because I didn't have anything left. So it was a success in that I completed the course, and it wasn't that bad, you know, a little dressing on my feet, and we're all set. But, you know, that was 12 and a half hours of racing. And so it's just like things happen to your body and things happen in your mind. I mean, the amount of time when you're on the bike for 5 hours, you know, and you know you have a marathon coming up, you don't think about the marathon. You think about different things, you know, kids growing up and like vacations and fun stuff. And then when you get off and and your legs are like, yeah, no, you just tell yourself, okay, we're running now. We're not riding a bike anymore, so we can do this. You know, let's recruit some different muscles and wait a mile or two for the blood flow to all shift to the right muscles, and let's keep going. And then once you get rolling, I just say, okay, I'm gonna do one more aid station, one more aid station, one more aid station. You know, sometimes it was 2 or 3, and I'm feeling pretty good. Maybe a 5K or a 10K in there. You're like, yeah, sweet, I'm rolling. And then the wheels fall off, and you hit the aid station, which is, they're phenomenal in the Ironman. They're like 10 tables long, and they're a buffet of everything you can possibly imagine. And your body tells
what are
you
you
need.
reaching for? That, like, what do you find yourself reaching for in those moments?
It'll tell you your like instinct will guide you to what you need. As you scan the table, it might be like early on, it might be like something odd like pretzels, and you just eat that, or it might be like a bowl of chicken soup. And maybe toward the later couple of miles, like from the finish, you're like, I never drink anything or eat processed sugar. So like a soda, you know, soda doesn't exist to me, right? Or when you were growing up, but you slam a glass of Coke, you know, 5 or 6 ounces of Coca-Cola, and that's amazing. That's an instant energy boost, and that'll get you somewhere. So sometimes it was that, and it just varied. Whatever your body's asking for, you give it. And I'm not like, you know, I was minimally trained to finish and have fun. And believe it or not, I did have fun. I mean, it's there's difficult times in there, but it's always, I always wanted to just make sure that I was having a good time. And sometimes on those long things, your mind kind of wanders and you're in a dark place. But overall, you know, after it, I'm like, that was really awesome. And pieces of it, I mean, I cherish those memories. They're phenomenal. To be able to say that I've done it and know I could do it.
Is there any part of you that feels that itch, like, oh, it would be cool to, you know, how many people in their 60s finish an Ironman? Like, is there any?
You know, it's funny. I never let go of things that are a challenge, and that's a challenge. And so it's out there. It's on the list. But I've got other things that are really piquing my interest that are equally as physically challenging. And, you know, having segued from that into, you know, CrossFit for a decade almost, and then now this new sport, it's just a natural progression. I don't get burnout because I kind of move on to other things. And I like that because it keeps my body intact reasonably, you know? Right. And so I don't have like 30 years of running overuse in my body that I have to contend with, because I always ran the minimum. The 2 marathons I've run in my life were in the Ironman races at the end of those, you know. I'd never run 18 miles before that, and I've never run 18 miles since. Yeah. So I did what I needed to do to finish and have a good time and have a reasonable time. You know, it's still a respectable time. I didn't want to have a glow stick and run at night, and I didn't. Right. You know, I came in the daylight, and so that's a victory.
It's interesting to me that compartmentalization that has to occur in all of these, any kind of avenue where you're pushing your own limits by your own regard. And I mean, CrossFit is very much that way. Combat sports are very much that way. Anything that's individual based, I think it ramps up a little bit, especially in combat sports, because someone else is attacking you also, which is a different element. But in CrossFit competition, it's you against you, and then that against the other submitted competition times from people all around the world. With DEKA, it's you against you. With Ironman, it's you against you. So we all have interesting ways of bargaining with ourselves and dealing with ourselves to like get through the game of just the hard work that has to be done. You can't get from the start line to the finish line in Ironman without grinding at some point. You just can't.
Yep.
There's whether you're the most competitive pro athlete, you're like, that guy Blue running marathons in under, 2.5 hours. I mean, that you're like anaerobic the whole time. Or if you're someone who's doing their very first one and all you want to do is finish, even with the glow stick, you're pushing yourself that way. So it's this interesting mental composition that I think that many people have.
I think it's it's something you can teach yourself, and it's a learned behavior that you can hone over time. I think everybody in competitive sports suffers in their event, because if you're not, then you're not competitive. And so, you're just out there doing it as general fitness, which is great. There's a huge segment of the population that is after fitness and they're not competitive, and that's fine. I have a competitive fire, and I always will. I'll be running sprints in my 90s, at a meet, because I want to compete against other guys that are 90. I just like to compete against people. But every time you go into that area where your mind wants to say no, because it does, when you start to hurt, that's the first thing. Your brain is a giant muscle, and it's telling you with a really loud voice, and it's telling you, just stop. You can just sit down. You don't have to run this marathon. You can just sit on this nice bench and have this nice little bowl of soup in your Ironman. And you have to say, no. I know I'm physically capable of doing more, and so shut up and take a back seat, brain, and I'm going. And then when you're done with that event, you can go back in your head, in your memory, and remember what that felt like and how you felt physically, and you raise the bar a little more in your next event of the same kind. You have that memory. You push on the bike and then you run, and you go, ooh, I didn't know I could push that hard on the bike. So the next time you push harder on the bike and you run, and you still run as well, and you're like, ooh, I could push more. And so you just keep ratcheting the bar up, and that's that mental game in here that elite athletes all have, because they can just do unbelievable things. The people you have on your show, the interviews are just incredible, but they all have the same mindset. Yep. And I'm just an amateur age group competitor in different sports, and I have it. It's just I don't smash that barrier, in double sessions for a living.
Right.
So I haven't dialed it in to that level, but I have to apply it. I want to quit a lot.
Same.
And I just say no.
And this happened the other day. It's so funny. So when I'm high frequency in jiu-jitsu, I run on Wednesdays. I, like you, hate running. My body doesn't love running either. I feel it like every time I run. And I do this loop from our house. It's like 2.5 miles. If I'm really feeling good, I'll do like a 6 miler or something. But I really keep it to this one day. It's just Wednesdays I run. And I've been running this same loop for like 2 years. And there's this one hill that's like 200 yards probably from bottom to the top. And every time for the last like year and a half, I'm just like, you got to run fast up this hill. So I'll sprint the hill. It'll totally destroy my heart rate. And then it takes me about, another quarter mile to get my heart rate back down to like my average run pace. And I just signed up for this tournament that I don't want to, that I'm not excited about doing, but I know it'll be good for me. It'll progress my skill, and it's good to be in a competitive environment every once in a while. And so I was running by this hill, and I was like, fuck, man, I got to do hill sprints. And this is like, no one, I'm not on a team. I'm not a professional. I'm not doing this for a living. I'm a pure hobbyist, and there's no one else around telling me what to do. And I'm like, I know I have to do this. And then what got in my head was, if I run by this hill and I don't do this series of hill sprints, then I'm selling myself short on my conditioning for this tournament. Mm-hmm. So I sat there and I just hit them all, one after the other. I'd sprint up, do the walk back down as soon as I get to the bottom, go back up. And like after the second one, I'm like, fuck this, man. Like, I hate this. This sucks. Because you're completely at your lactic threshold at the top. So your legs feel like they're literally going to burn off, or you're going to throw up. Right. And you've established a set distance that you've decided to commit yourself to doing. And so, but then you get, one sucks, two's really bad. But if you're only doing 5, you get over 3, and then 4 is not that bad, and then you only got 1 left. So it's like you do this thing in your head, and then at the end, I was like, man, I am totally cooked. Now I should just walk home. I earned it. Just like walk back home. I was like, nope, you got to run home. So
Right.
I let the best I could get my breath back, and then I ran home. And I was thinking about it a lot on the way back, and I'm like, why can't I just go and just do jiu-jitsu? Like, why can't I just show up and punch the clock and just be another student in the academy? And I think a lot about you when I think about this stuff, because I see it's like, why can't Dad just be the guy that shows up and does CrossFit a couple days a week? You can't. You have to shoot for like the global list of top competitors that are within your age group, and like, track your times all year round. And I always laugh so much when I think about this, because I don't know what it is. It's a complete intangible, but somehow it trickled directly downstream, and it's part of everything I do. It's the weirdest thing.
It's some neurological pathway that I think it's genetic to a certain point. That yes, the brain is a muscle, but I think that somehow, like, it's very curious to kind of find that out. Like, is that something that's hereditary, or is that not? Because I know that the brain part of it, like if you had seen that hill and then said, nah, like, I didn't get much sleep last night, or I really didn't have very good nutrition in the last day, and I'm not feeling it, so I'm just this one time, I'm going to bail. That's like no different than skipping the reps. Like if you're doing sit-ups, Arnold Schwarzenegger used to say it's the first 80 that are they don't count. It's the ones
it's
after
only the
that
last 20.
Count.
Yep.
Right. And that's true. And so that's an exercise. The brain just missed out on some really good exercise of you saying, I don't want to do this, and you saying, we're doing it. It's like, that's a rep for the brain. But if you say, okay, no problem, then that's a victory for the brain. They skip the reps, and it's like, it doesn't exercise that part of the brain muscle that is critical for competitiveness. Like that.
Well, and then your likelihood of making the decision of giving yourself the out is higher in the future.
Exactly, because we're just animals in the end, and that's how we train.
Yep.
If you give them the treat without doing the trick, then they're never going to do the trick again. They're just going to want the treat.
No, it's totally like
it's the same thing.
Primordial, like. It is, and to be aware of that is very valuable.
But there's a huge segment of the population again that just want just regular fitness. They want to come to the gym. They want to feel supported in an environment where they can be exactly who they are that day, without judgment by their peers or others. And they want to go in and they want to work out and they want to break a sweat and go home. Yeah. And whether for them that's just towing that uncomfortable line and then backing off. They've still got a sweat on and they kind of did their thing and backed off. Whereas I would find that line, and if today's training warranted it, to push up into that lactate, where it really hurts, and then come back out, then that's what I would do. And everybody's different. But there's plenty of people that are not wired like what we were just talking about. And they're like, no, I wouldn't want to join a competition or a race or an event. It's like it doesn't appeal to them at all, and I totally respect that. It's just that's not how. I'd be curious to do a widespread survey on were their parents athletes, competitive athletes, or no, and kind of see if there's any kind of correlation between generational athleticism in the parents and or not. It's kind of an interesting science sort of thing.
Yeah, if it's the like nature versus nurture concept, if it's learned or if it's inherent. I think that's I've always kind of felt like maybe it's some of both. Like you can learn to push yourself harder, and I think team sports lend themselves to that because of the camaraderie aspect. You can be someone who maybe wouldn't push yourself to a 7 on your own, but in a team setting you push yourself to an 8, and I think that happens a lot. So it can happen on the individual side of it. It's also depending on like where you're starting and where you're going, right? Like maybe you're not doing hill sprints the very first time you run by this hill, but the first time you walk up it, and then a couple months later, you decide you're going to jog up it, and then you do that for a year or whatever, and progress it. So just in that little example. But I think that the behavior of pushing that limit, one, it can be figured out as you go, but two, as your fitness improves and as your abilities improve, then your likeliness to take on new challenges also improves. So if you've never been in a CrossFit gym before, let's say, you're not going to RX the first watt, right? You're going to learn the movements, right? Maybe you're doing everything with a PVC pipe first. And just the thought of doing it any other way is so overwhelming. And then and this happens in gyms all over the place. I mean, look to the group of people that are there. A lot of those people at one point were not the hardcore worker that they are now. They developed that and they learned that in the setting and with the skill set and with the mechanics, and then all those tools put together really allowed them to push to that next level. But where that line is, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting because I'm incredibly driven, as you know, and I can I've chosen these solo kind of things, and yet today was a perfect example. There was a workout at the gym, and it was 5 rounds of handstand push-ups and 800-meter runs. And I knew that based on just my particular training right now, because I'm kind of, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but I'm transitioning out of strict CrossFit training right now. And so I knew that today was going to be totally recovery day, zone 2 running. So, but I knew that I would have a much more enjoyable time, and it would be more quality if I went to the gym to do that. I could have run out the door here and done 800-meter laps, but I don't have that David Goggins drive.
You're not broken.
To do that. So I went to the gym and I had a great workout with laughing and joking and carrying on, and I got my 800s at zone 2. And I wasn't going to do the handstand push-ups, and then I did them all anyway. But so that happened. But I didn't have to go out and grind it. It was fun, and I got the work in. So going to an environment that was social, I liked. So I'm not like this solo animal out there just with the competitive blinders on. So I really like that. It's a really good balance because there's way more to life for me than just double and triple sessions and putting,
totally.
I think I'd be a much better athlete if I did that, but I don't want to do that.
Well, it's also priorities. It's what is at the end of the day, and this is actually, I guess, in a way, a good segue into what DEKA is and everything that they're about. But what is the end goal that you're after? Is it longevity and health and enjoyment and pushing yourself where the opportunity presents itself, or is it to be the best person in the world ever of all time? And if it's more on the longevity side and doing things that keep you healthy but allow you to push yourself, even in the CrossFit sphere, you're learning a lot about your body. You're learning a lot about how to take care of your body because CrossFit presents you with issues that you have to deal with, right? It puts you in an environment that tests what you have, and wheels fall off sometimes when that happens. So you're forced to learn a lot about how you move, how you recover, what tendencies you have, and all of those things really do help you with longevity because it's like movement. If you understand better where your body is in space, you become a better mover. So if you understand better how your body works, recovers, exerts energy, digests food, then you're going to become a better athlete, and longevity should improve because of your knowledge. So within the DEKA and the CrossFit world, you don't have to want to be Rich Froning to have a good time and to get the benefits.
Right. No, I definitely, for me personally, I'm into it for it does 2 things. It keeps me mentally stable because I require that exertion of energy and the de-stressor that it provides for me.
Yep.
And then I just like being fit. I know I feel like when I'm out of shape, life is more difficult to get around physically, and I just feel better when I'm fit. and I'm not fanatical about it. Some people would beg to differ, but I don't feel I am. You know, I take random days off as my body tells me. I don't have this strict structure. I don't have 2-a-days. You know, unless I really feel up for it and want to do it. But it's definitely an absolute critical thing to have consistency in my life. And if I look back over 4 decades, you know, and when I was in my teens is when I really first started to sort of go to athletic events, like sign up for races and stuff like that. So it's been, since then, I'm 57 now. So it's been a long time, and just being a student of it, of what my body does. And I'm still learning. I'm getting some body work done now from a specialist, and working on some shoulder issues that I've had that are more like just really long-term stuff that I should finally be looking at. And, you know, half of my session is asking questions and listening to the answers, learning about where my lat's attached to and what things are going on, so that I love all that stuff. So there's such a broad range of stuff that you can learn and be in the health environment, and the whole nutrition side of it and the exercise. It's like, wow, there's so much, and it's constantly changing as we learn with science and statistics and facts and technology. It's unbelievable where we can go with it now. And, you know, the things that we can do as humans are just, I mean, the Berlin Marathon, I mean, he almost broke 2 hours the other day. It was 2:01
Really?
change. 2:01:08, I think was it. It's like, are you kidding me? Like,
That's running a...
It's like, I don't want to do the math right now, but it's like running sub 450s the whole way. It's something like that. Somebody will take offense to that because it's way under sub 5.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think.
For 26.2.
How to understand if anyone listening ran the fastest that they could possibly run for 40 yards, right? An all-out sprint, and you multiplied that pace to get a mile, you're probably not touching, for the average person, you're probably not touching, even then, the pace that this person finished the marathon at. That is so ungodly fast.
Yeah, it's
for almost everyone, that's a full sprint for a marathon. For 26.2 miles, you're running as fast as you possibly can run.
And they're doing that in all sports. They're doing that in all
sports. But
it's
because like you said, the science and the understanding have gotten so much better, and the knowledge of nutrition and recovery, that you can better push the athletes because you know more. And like talking to Richard Diaz was really interesting because he's done over 1,000 VO2 assessments on elite athletes. So he's done way more in total, helping general population, but 1,000 elite athlete VO2 maxes. And the information that you can extract from that and then program unique to this individual person's aerobic or anaerobic thresholds to change the way that they do their training, and then couple that with nutrition and then put them in the environment to go compete. It's just, the more data sets that you have, the more people have run marathons, the more people have competed, the more people have done events and provided information around it, and they've provided their heart rate. It's like you just get more to play with, and with that we're getting people to run faster and faster and faster, or snatch more, or squat more, or deadlift more, or do more back-to-back rounds, or, you know, whatever it is. So sport is changing across the board at just like an insane pace as we know more about the physiology of what's happening to the athlete while they're doing the thing.
Right.
I think on that note,
that's happening. Yeah, while that's happening, and I think we're going to segue into the same thing, that there's more and more and more and more people in the population that are turning to like sports of this nature, that where they can really test themselves over variety, like instead of this single modality like running or swimming or biking, or, you know, now the OCR stuff, the obstacle course racing stuff, you have the Spartan races with all of the obstacles, and then you have High Rocks, which came out of that, which is less obstacles, more running, but 10 or 8 obstacles well, physical challenges, tests in the middle of that, to DEKA, which is 10 physical tests with running or not. And it's like, and those sports are blooming all over the world because people are realizing we don't need to go in and look at the mirror in the Globo gym.
Right.
That works for some people, and so that's fine. But there's a lot of people that want to be challenged on a broader sense, and so those sports are really taken off.
One thing that's really positive about all this kind of stuff is that when you have something that you're working towards, there's a lot of things that change without your effort. You're putting the effort towards getting the thing done. You signed up for the marathon, you're going to run it. You signed up for the sprint triathlon, you're going to do it. You signed up for a DEKA event, it's on this date. As soon as that number is in your head or that day is on the calendar, there's things that just change about how you do stuff. You make changes in your nutrition, no matter who you are, whether you're someone who lives a sedentary lifestyle or someone who's really active. It just happens. Things start to change because there's skin in the game now. There's something on the line. And whether you're doing it because you want to finish or because you want to qualify for nationals, that psychology adjusts. And it's one of, in my eyes, having coached people for years, it's one of the most powerful things you can do on like a weight loss journey. If you tag any kind of physical performance goal to it, whether it's to walk a 5K or to do your first 10K or to do a DEKA event, whatever it is, it adjusts the way that people do everything. And they see great progress in their weight management during that time because they make better choices because it matters.
Right.
And so with like the DEKA stuff, it's really cool because I think, and we'll explain what DEKA is for everyone that doesn't know, but CrossFit attracts a very specific, a lot of these people in total, but a very specific type of person. Like you do have to possess a certain switch in your body to be able to push through this threshold to complete a workout, to actually submit that for like an annual games competition, right? You got to be able to go in the pain cave a little bit and work and pop out on the other side and lay on the floor dead, right? It's kind of like if you're
on
not
a consistent basis
on a couple days a week, and there's some gripe about the programming in CrossFit and this or that, but for the most part, that structure and the bravado that comes with it, it's going to turn a lot of people off, which is fine. That is no means for CrossFit to adjust who it is, right? It's a great product, and It's done wonderful things for the world of fitness. Amazing things, from equipment to personalities, everything. But there's a lot of people that might be intimidated by that kind of structure that still want something. And maybe they don't want to sign up to do a Spartan that's 10.2 miles because that's a long run. And they're looking for something in the middle. And it sounds like DEKA, the multiple offerings that they have, is a fantastic way for all skill levels, including the competitive person, to come into this. So maybe you can explain a little bit what DEKA is, how it came about, and its like adjacent relationship to CrossFit and what drew you into it.
Sure. Well, I don't know the exact year that DEKA first formed, but I know there's a partnership. It was born out of Spartan racing, and Spartan racing is like obstacles and running. It's usually like on a ski mountain type environment where you're running up and down and you're doing these obstacles. You're crawling through mud and you're going up and over things with ropes, and it requires teammates. And we've all probably seen videos of that. Yep. And there's a lot of overhead sort of things
like
that have to happen, and there's usually burpee penalties and things like that. And it's incredibly physical, and it's very challenging. Some of the obstacles are really intimidating for a lot of people. And so, although it has a huge following, and there's different distances, but there was recognized a need for a similar type of structured event that didn't have such intimidating obstacles. Mm-hmm. And so Yancey Culp and John Cena was the CEO or something to that effect of Spartan, and they co-founded DEKA. And DEKA is, as you would expect, 10 stations. And there's 3 different lengths of discipline. And the stations are always the same, and they're always in the same order. And if it's a DEKA strong, it's just those 10 stations. And,
no running.
There's no running. And the stations are always the same. There's something specific to Spartan, and it's a ram. It's a metal tube that has foam on the outside, and it's hollow, and you can kind of grip it like this. And it's different weights, and there's so during these 10 events, occasionally you use these things, and they're specific to Spartan, but they're used in the DEKA events. So you do lunges. You flip that thing up, and you do lunges, alternating lunges, where you touch your knee, and you do 30 of those, and you immediately go to a 500-meter run. 500-meter row, and then I got my cheat sheet here because sometimes I get them mixed up. Then you go right to 20-box step overs, and it doesn't matter how old or young you are. The weights and the distances are always the same. They're just different for women. There's a set, and I haven't memorized those weights yet.
So these aren't, but it's not like CrossFit where you got like a 90-pound sandbag you're throwing over your shoulder, and if you can't lift 90 pounds, then you can't do the event. It's like right, very applicable to everyone.
They're all reachable things. They're all doable things. And then med ball sit-ups, 25-pound med ball sit-ups like this. You go back, you touch the ball, you go forward, you touch the ball, you do 25 of those, right into a 500-meter skate ski, right into 100-meter, 2 dumbbells, 1 in each hand, 60 pounds. You go for 100 meters. When you're done with that, you go right into a 25-calorie assault bike. And that's where the work really begins, because now all of a sudden you're up to full body, because you kind of start out with these things that are maybe legs, or they're maybe arms, or they're the rear chain, and now all of a sudden you're using everything. And hopefully you've paced it right so you don't die on that bike, because that can really eat up time. And then you go to 20 60-pound dead balls over the shoulder. You got to drop those over the shoulder. And then a tank. It's a wheeled tank with resistance, and you got to pull and push that for 100 meters down and back.
So it's like a wheelbarrow meters. Push, basically.
Yeah, it's like a 4-wheeled tank sled with arms that come up like this, and you push and pull that thing. And you can have there's 2 different resistances, one for male, one for female. And then when you're done with that, you do 20 ram burpees. Again, you have that ram. It's a different weight. It's 44 pounds. You go down and burpee to your chest, snap to your feet, up over your head, 20 of those. You're done. You cross the finish line, and you're smoked. And it could take you anywhere from 15 to, the elites are doing it in 11 minutes, up to, however long it takes. It might take you 45 minutes, whatever you find a pace, and all of those things are doable. You can do 20 of these or 30 of these or 500 meters on this. You just find a pace. That's the strong. Then you have the mile, which each of those the same 10 stations are preceded by a 160-meter run. So you run, then you do those lunges, then you run, then you do the row, etc.
Gotcha.
And that, again, depending on how long it takes you, and those 10 runs total a mile.
Gotcha.
So however long it might take you a mile of compromised running, because you're coming off these machines and you're going on to new machines, so you're not smoking the sprints, that'll be, whatever kind of time, 15 minutes to an hour, who knows. Right. Then the last one is DEKA Fit, which is preceded by a 500-meter run, which is a total of 5K run.
So that's like on a track, right? So that's like 2 laps. You do a.
It's set up usually inside like an arena, and you leave the station. You go 2 laps around, and you come into station 2 just before it. Then you do 2 laps around. You come into station 3 just before that, and you kind of counterclockwise go back around, or clockwise depending on how they have it set up. So you're always doing the same amount of run each time.
So how does when you're
each one of those is very different, because a big, powerful, strong athlete can crush the strong event, which has no running, but they might not do so well in the fit event, which has a total of a 5K. So that's more suited to runners that have strength. So for me, I'm kind of in between. I'm not a fast runner, but I'm a decent runner, and I'm strong, so I can do the fitness zones well. So it's a good combo. So the mile event is really good for me. So
because it's like the blend of the two.
it's the blend of the two, especially when you start getting up into 50. I'm in the 50 to 55 to 59 age group. There's not a lot of guys that have full function from the top of this to their toes. Like they got body parts that over the years have been busted up, myself included, and you're working with that. But so that's the sport, and I think that it really. And then they also they do. And I don't know that much about it because I haven't been focused on it, and I'm trying to do a cram session on the whole DEKA thing, is they have a body weight option. So again, it appeals to people that they don't want to carry 60-pound dumbbells. So I'm not quite sure what the station is. Maybe they do, I don't know, but it's
a bear
you
crawl
do body
or
weight things to get through. So totally doable. It's scaled down to pretty much anybody can do it. Maybe it's push-ups from your knees on something and things like that, which is awesome. So they've appealed to a whole side of people who love to do crazy, like broad-ranging things in an event, kind of be more well-rounded athlete, and yet not have to suffer some of these really kind of scary things that it might be intimidating. So they break it down, and then maybe in a couple of years when they get good at this, then they go into the Spartan kind of thing.
Right. Well, that's one thing that with CrossFit, it's the barrier to entry. I've always thought is barbell mechanics. Like if you don't have a hold on barbell mechanics or gymnastics, you're going to find hurdles in CrossFit a lot, because you're going to just generally be at risk for injury if you can't pull a deadlift safely and you have to do 21, 15, 9 deadlifts. That's bad. Right. If you can't do a front squat right and you got to do thrusters, that's bad. If you can't do a pull-up and you're supposed to do kipping pull-ups, that's bad. So there's like all these points in CrossFit where you need to develop this skill, which is a beautiful thing about it, right? There is a skill acquisition component of CrossFit that's great, and it can bring you along and keep you consistent for a while. And there's some phenomenal coaches out there that are guiding this stuff. This sounds like it's a lot easier to enter into from any point, because you really just have to be able to secure this item. And then there's CrossFit elements like the assault bike and the rower that are anaerobic and tough, and they're difficult, and they might stem from that, but you don't really have to learn that much to use an assault bike. You got to be able to sit upright, push and pull and pedal. And so you can work yourself, but you're not placing yourself at risk because like your elbows don't lock out when you're overhead or something like that.
Right. And you're not putting your body weight overhead hoping that your elbows are going to lock out.
Right.
So I went to and competed in a number of DEKA events this summer. I think like 8 or 9 of them, and it's kind of like a marathon. If you stay at the finish of a marathon, it's all walks. It's from the elite one where you'd go, oh yeah, definitely a runner. She's a runner, he's a runner. Like that's what they do, but it's all shapes and sizes. And the same in these gyms. There's hundreds of these gyms that are DEKA specific, where it's kind of minimal equipment. They don't need these big rigs and these piles of Olympic weights like CrossFit gyms do. And so they're smaller oftentimes, or they're at YMCAs and things like that, because they can just get a couple of tanks or something like that, and they've got the equipment that they need. And I've seen all kinds of people doing these events when I go to them, and it's really fun to see, because there's a lot of people that are just doing it just to start and finish and to say I did it. It's a big high five. I have so much respect for those people that are just in it to try something new, and they come out the other side and they've put it just as much effort as I have.
Yep.
And the smile on their face and the encouragement that they get from their fellow competitors and bystanders, it's really fun. I mean, I love that more than almost anything else in all of these sports, is the support from fellow competitors and spectators, and the coaches.
Well, that's one thing appreciated about, I've only found out about DEKA since you started getting involved with it and competing, but one thing that I found that I like a lot is that exact thing. Is it seems like it's more welcoming just in general. It's like, hey, you've been going to the gym, you've been running a little bit. Why not just sign up, do it, see, have some fun with your friends, like find an application for all the work that you're doing, which is something that I think in the past, from like a more macro view of the fitness industry, is like you touched on earlier, there's people that will always be working out for the aesthetic, and that's great. It's good. Like they're doing something positive for themselves and it's good for their body. And that's awesome. If that's the thing that's motivating you to get into the gym and find your consistency all the time, like hats off. For a lot of people, they get to a point where you've kind of honed this new skill. You're more athletic or fit than you used to be, but now what? And so this gives you an answer to the now what, because in the past, the now what was do a triathlon or start doing CrossFit, right? There wasn't a really good functional application of like, let's take some of the movements that you've been practicing. And, you know, before you couldn't do a lunge, now you can do a lunge, you can do a box step up. You learned how to use the rower. You learned how to run safely, pain-free. Why don't you go try this out and see how it feels? And you can see it on people's face. I mean, if you go watch any of the videos, right, like all walks of life, you said crossing the finish line, it's ear-to-ear smile. Because for the first time, maybe that person's experiencing like the joy of there's nothing better than finishing a competition or like something you've been working towards. You know, you've been working your ass off for it. Whether you set a record and you qualify for nationals or you cross the finish line, it's amazing, and you can see it on their face how cool that is. And it's fantastic that there's this avenue now, which I will say, it sounds like we're saying this is just like an easy event for anyone to do. The elite competition and your qualifications, they're pretty bonkers. I think I told you this early on. Like I went on YouTube and checked some of this stuff out, and I watched. It must have been an elite. What was the last one you said? Not the mile. Oh, the fit. I watched one of those. Oh my God! I mean, these are world-class athletes. They're not like run of the mill.
And I got to say, at my level too, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done physically. Like,
really?
Yeah. And that's totally up to my self-regulation. Like I choose to go there, right? I choose to push into that space. But it just the way it's brilliantly designed. I mean, Yancey figured it out, you know, where you start out easy and you really have to watch your pace. And I mean, you're going at 85, 90% at least until you hit the bike, you know, and then you try to unload on that and then go and hang on. But, you know, everyone's got different strategies, but I'm in it. Like the voice saying, just back off a touch, or just, you know, why don't you just take it easy, is pretty freaking loud for a long time in those events. And maybe it's because I'm new to them. I don't know, but it's barking in my ear the whole time. And I'm smoked when I'm done with those, and I love it. Like I want to do it again, you know, and I think part of that is I'm still figuring it out. Every time I race, I get a little better, or I tweak something, try something out a little differently. But to the last part of your question was, you know, I've been doing CrossFit for 10 years, and my goal for a long time with CrossFit was to drive down into the top 200, because that was like you qualify for the final level in age groups to like the online qualifier, they called it. And out of that, you get a new series of workouts. There's the Open every year, and there's like 5 weeks of that. And if you qualify in the top 200 at the end of that, then you go into the online qualifier, and they release usually 5 workouts that you have to finish in 1 week. And out of that final leaderboard, the top 20 in each age group used to go to the games. Now it's down to 10. Sometimes it fluctuates. There's been a little bit of up and down there. And I achieved my goal a couple of years ago. I got down into the top 200, did the online qualifier, got down to 115th in the world, I think, which is like the upper half of 1%. And I was like, sweet. And I recognized my limiters. I'm like, I have some old injuries. I have some skills, that lack of gymnastics skill set. certain things started to show up that if you want to get down and really swim in that cream of the crop, then you really need to have these things honed in. Yeah. And I'm like, I know what it's going to take to get those last 1% out of everything, and the amount of training and the amount of focus and the amount of dialing in all these different things. And do I want to do that? And as I was questioning that, I was also looking at my body. And, you know, Abe, you and I have had discussions over the last year or so, year and a half, about how you have to, like, if things are not going to get better, you know, if you have I have a foot injury from years ago. I fell off a roof and shattered my foot, and it shows up. Like, I can't jump off the thing for like the last 5 years, and that's a limiter. And so either I get it looked at and fixed, or it's going to get worse. And of course it did. It got worse. And so then my right knee blew out, and then my right shoulder blew out, and they're all related. So, okay. So I said, okay, I'm going to start like taking care of myself now. So I need to back off on my training, and I need to see a specialist, and I need to start working here, and then work on the knee, and then get down to the foot. Right? So simultaneously with that, I said, okay, I'm not doing any more overhead pressing, because I have like some rotator cuff stuff. It's not an injury. It's just over and under compensation things, tendonitis and all kinds of things going on there that I'm working on. But I had to change my training. So I'm still doing CrossFit, but now I can't, or I don't, I'm electing not to do kipping pull-ups. Usually I don't do handstand push-ups, but like I used 2 mats, so my range of motion was much lower, so I'm not pushing all the way down. So protecting that shoulder, double unders, I'm not doing that because I'm not jumping off the ball on my foot, things like that. So now so right about that same time of like, okay, I got to start doing different things. I'm sitting and I'm looking at YouTube videos of athletic things, which I do. I don't watch TV, but I do that. And oh, look at this cool sport. You know, it's like cardio. Right. That's my jam. So I saw that DEKA, and I said, ooh, that looks like something I'd be good at. And so I looked it up, and then I found out, oh, there's one in Connecticut. So I went down, I signed up, and it was a DEKA mile. No run training other than a few 800s and stuff here. And I happen to be the gym, which is run by Kevin Gregory and his wife, Jen, Underdog Fitness, and he's an top elite competitor in DEKA. So I hit the nucleus of, I mean, he and a partner have.
That's where you're at now?
No, that's where I went for my first event. So I went to a really good gym to get my initial race in. It just happened to be, could have been anywhere. But this guy had this set up like perfect. He's a pro competitor. He's an elite. He's got the number 2 time in the strong in the world in the elite category, and he's number 1 time in the team, the pairs, mixed pairs. And so I was like, wow. And I could pepper him with questions, and it was like all the right information. Right. And so, because he's been doing it for a while. And so I got hooked. And I put up a national qualifying, world championship qualifying time at the time. And I'm like, whoa, that was like, I really enjoyed it.
Is that because no one's competing, or because it was that good?
It's held up. There's like 200 and something guys that posted competitive times.
So you walked in there and you just like basically smoked the hell out of it.
Yeah. I remember his wife. She was my judge, because I said, look, I'm used to like quasi like blacking out during CrossFit events. And so I need somebody that knows what they're doing so they can tell me the numbers, because I'm not going to be able to count past 3. Forget counting 25.
Yeah, you're in go mode.
I can't count. So I need a judge. I'm very clear to my judge. You need to count in 5s, and then you need to count down the last 5, and then you got to tell me when there's 1 and go. And then you got to yell at me to when I'm coming around on my run, where to go next. Like, this is your station, Hudson, over here, the big orange flag, like here. Because I'm like, I just go in a different place in my head. And so she was like, I remember somebody asking her, I was sort of in mid blackout zone, and I'm on this bike or the skate ski or something. And he said, how's he doing? And she goes, he's doing really well. I just remember hearing that. It just sort of stuck out. And then at the end, she goes, look at this. And then it posts on a global leaderboard, which is pretty cool.
Like instantaneously.
Yeah. So it's immediately there and you can see it. And that I've since improved on that time, but that time would have qualified me for the Worlds, but I since improved on that. So I ended up 7th in the world in the mile, 7th in the world in the strong, and 9th in the world in the fit.
Wow.
So all the World Championship invites came out, and I declined the fit one because it's too much volume to do. It's in one weekend in November.
You can't do all three of those at that level.
So,
if you're going to go do it to do it, sure.
Right.
But if you're going to go do it to compete, it's probably
I believe it or not, like I'm throwing the dart way high, and I'm saying, all right, I'm reaching for the podium. So what's my best chance? And I'm 11 seconds off the podium in the strong, and I'm 26 seconds or something off the podium in the mile. And they're about the same gain that you have to get, because it's, you're not going to gain as much time in the strong versus a couple of seconds per run in the mile, and you might be right there. So I've signed up. I declined the world invite for the fit because that's on Saturday, and that would just trash me for Sunday.
Yeah, you'd be throttled.
And so I'm doing the strong late morning on Sunday, and then the mile 6 hours later. So
when
what do I do?
When you're at the end of one of these events, you've done 2 Ironmans, you've competed in CrossFit for 10 years, you're into these DEKA events. When you're smoked at the end of a DEKA event, how does it compare to CrossFit and to Ironman?
The Ironman is a whole different ball of wax, because it's like what your body does to get you through, like the hormonal things and the adrenal things that go on, and it's so long that it's a totally different drain. Like you are smoked for like a week, right? When you're done with an Ironman event, like forget it. You just put your training shoes, you hang up, you can't even walk for a couple days. It's like you're done. And don't even ask me if I'm ever going to do any athletic event again for at least 4 days after an Ironman. Right. I'm not even going to run a 2K, right?
Right.
So that's different. But CrossFit, it's interesting because before each event, like in a competition, I'm nervous as heck, like really nervous. Just I am, because it hurts and it's hard, and you have to ask a lot of yourself to get through it on a competitive level. So that's a good sign that I'm nervous, and I get the butterflies when I think about it a couple days beforehand, because that's my body preparing, the adrenal and the thing, like I'm getting prepared. I'm like, oh, that's a good sign. I've learned to accept that instead of be afraid of it. Yes. I'm like, yes, it's doing all the right things to get me prepared, right? And then you go in, and all I say now is I'm bringing the best version of myself that I can to that day. And then be it as it may. You can have a good day, you can have a bad day, and I've had both on competition days. And so it's oftentimes it's outside of your control. You just have to accept that you've done the work. Now enjoy yourself. Sometimes the enjoyment doesn't happen until later, but you at the end, you're just smoked. But the CrossFit events and the DEKA events, they're short enough. They're within like 15 minutes. You're mostly recovered. Yeah, your central nervous system is whacked, and there's things that are really depleted inside of you. But you can get up and you can walk around and you converse with people, and you can consider going out to dinner, and you can stay awake. You're still alive. So those events.
My motivation for doing an Ironman is just like. It's just like plummeting. It's like I had zero desire. Now I have like negative desire to do it.
Yeah, it's that's a whole.
But you're anaerobically cashed at the end of a CrossFit workout. Maybe a little more too on like the pump of just so many reps and so many exercises, and then you're cashed at the end of a DEKA event. But maybe it's a little bit more. Just the anaerobic smack of like you put everything out there as hard as you could, and your heart rate was just tapping out for the last 5 minutes straight, and now you're done and you want to break.
Well, the data says otherwise for me. Like
really,
I wear a Whoop. I've got it on right now, and this gives me all kinds of feedback.
Mainly the most insane tan on your arms.
Yeah, it's a whoop tan,
Christ.
right? But so it records my heart rate and my energy exertion and my strain and my sleep and recovery and all this stuff. But when I look at a workout, my heart rate goes like from here, and it's like 3, 2, 1, go, blam. Okay, time, and it goes down like that. It is not something that goes like this.
You're talking about a DEKA event.
I'm talking about CrossFit. I'm talking about DEKA. I'm talking about how
it doesn't
my
matter
body,
for you.
It
okay,
doesn't matter.
So this is not to stop center tracks, but this was a fascinating piece of talking to Richard Diaz, which I don't know if you listened to that episode or not, but this was like
I did.
kind of put me on my ass because I've done so much VO2 testing with clients and talking about the aerobic and anaerobic thresholds and where you should train and why you should train there and what energy systems your body's using. And he and I were reflecting a little bit more specific to martial arts for a couple minutes in the episode. And I was saying, I'm like, look, well, shouldn't we have like an aerobic base? This is an idea you hear all the time in fitness, having an aerobic base, right? That you have a couple days in the week where you train this low intensity zone 2 manager floor, basically. And he was to the effect of, he's like, why the hell would you do that? The second that you and your opponent slap hands, you're anaerobic. Because if they shoot for a takedown, if you grab their collar, if they grab, like whatever it is that happens, the second anything starts, those first minute to 2 minutes, and in a jiu-jitsu match specifically, it's a 5-minute time period. He's like, you're 100% anaerobic instantaneously from what's happening hormonally, but also just your body, the way it kicks on. It's not a slow start and a steady increase. And it just kind of like, it stopped me in my tracks for a second. His whole purpose behind this with his book is he argues for more anaerobic training for endurance athletes, which again seems counterintuitive when you think about all the different information that's come about, but that he actually has guys like Blue or Hunter McIntyre training anaerobically a lot in preparation for endurance events. Right. And it's to this exact point, is it like, when you do look at what happens to your body, the second that they say go, all those butterflies from the days before leading up to it, your preparation, the nervousness, everything, that hits and it's fucking on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we all respond differently, and that is definitely how, I mean, over the years, and I think you even said that your heart rate does that too. Like, I seem to recall a conversation.
Well, that's the thing is that was his point, is we don't all respond differently. In these settings, we all respond the same, but we respond counterintuitive to what everyone says we do. Like if you're at a DEK event, unless you're someone who's not competing, and that is a big thing to point out. Like if you're someone who's going to go through the event, it's your first time, you're just going through the things, you might have a more gradual rise if you reflect on your Whoop data. But for someone who's competing, the second the gun goes off, if you're a swimmer, if you're a runner, if you're trying to get through all the stations, you're hard in the paint immediately. And what probably then the tick, 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 that's more of the stabilization, but you're really stabilizing in an anaerobic.
Right, that's like my window segment, to compete.
Right?
Like I can hold that for 43 minutes, in a workout.
Which is bonkers.
Right, but that's like because I've done a lot of training in that zone. And so my body is like, ooh, I can sit here and settle in. Whereas for, like you said, for non-competitive, untrained or lesser trained athlete, you're not going to be able to settle into that zone. You're going to hit that.
You think you're going to die.
Crash out of it, and you're going to be like pulling off to the sidelines because you're not well. But I was surprised when I saw that data that's how I operate, and I was surprised when I heard him say it, because you have Chris Hinshaw with aerobic capacity.
Yep.
You heard of him?
I've heard the name.
He was triathlete back in the day, came in second in the Hawaiian Ironman in the 80s, and now he trains a lot of the Mayhem athletes and a host of CrossFit athletes that traditionally, CrossFit athletes have always felt that if they want to get faster at something that's short and intense, they have to keep training at short and intense workouts, which is what Diaz was saying.
Right.
But Hinshaw took a number of these athletes, and this is where you have Diaz's philosophy and you have Chris Hinshaw's philosophy. He took a lot of these, like Jason Kalipa. He had zero aerobic capacity. So he said, okay, Jason, we got to back you down. We got to get you out on some long, slow stuff.
Yep.
And he did, because it's a different calling on different muscle fibers and delivery systems than your fast twitch and going that route. And he improved these athletes tremendously in that area. So it's contrary to what Diaz says, but what Diaz says also has some merit, because you take somebody like Blue, who trains under him, and improves. So it's like
right.
And yet we're individuals, and yet there's so much that crosses over that it, like you say, is not individualized. And
right.
it's,
well,
me,
I remember I've always had
baffling.
This ability, like when I was playing soccer as a kid, or if we were doing wind sprints for ski training or something, I can recall always having an ability to push into a higher heart rate zone and stay for a while. Mm-hmm. And not that it's enjoyable or comfortable. It's always uncomfortable and it always sucks. But there's a difference between sucking and being uncomfortable and not being able to do it. And it's sucking and being uncomfortable and being able to sustain that horribleness for a while. Like to be able to sprint a long distance and then barely stop and then do the same distance again, versus try and then just not be able to. So there's definitely some, and Diaz talked about that too, that there were some athletes that he's done VO2 assessments on, and he's just floored at their results, because there are, everyone's going to be different, and some people are going to be predisposed to perform better at those higher heart rates and be able to maintain it just as is without training.
Right. Like I remember him talking about the differences of VO2 max. Like he was shocked. Like there's some like elite cyclists who have a really low VO2, and then there's other athletes with a really high. And you'd think, I always thought the higher the number, the better the athlete.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, that's off the charts. He's an unbelievable athlete. Yeah, he is. But so is the guy with a really low one. He's an unbelievable. He's a 7-time world champion cyclist, and yet he's got like a 56 or something like that. You're like, what? And it's those kinds of things. Like, I think that more than anything, training has become really individualized. And so the more you know your own body, your own abilities, your own limitations, and then challenge those, then you're going to become a better athlete. Like instinctively, you start to learn things and do things as a competitive athlete. I think that a lot of more amateur athletes or recreational athletes that are a little bit more than recreational, I think, are like more than like random, like weekend tennis athletes or weekend golfers. But like amateur athletes are people that go to a gym on a regular basis 3-4 times a week to maintain that fitness that we talked about earlier. And they have coaches helping them stay within the guidelines, or giving them scaling options, or challenging them and giving them information that they're absorbing and learning. So forgot where I was going with that, but I think that there's a lot of, you have the different layers of athletes, and that once you go above and past the amateur level 3 to 4 times a week with coaches, and somebody like myself, like I'm a voracious reader and I want to learn more about this, and I listen to your podcast and I'm like, yeah, but Chris Hinshaw's saying this and Diaz is saying that, and then you got Nestor talking about breathing and nasal breathing, and I'm like, this is fascinating, and people say don't ever nasal breathe, you should never challenge your body that way, and then you should challenge, and I think that when these people dig in, Chris Hinshaw made a really great point. He was asked, do you think that, nasal breathing is becoming a really big thing? There's a lot of attention around it. Do you think it's a smart thing to do? And he said, the important thing for anybody to do is evaluate each individual and say, is this going to give that athlete the most gain for what they need to turn their attention to? For instance, if they're just learning to run all the way around the block, then you're not going to be asking them to nasal breathe. Because just the challenge of getting them around the block, you have to challenge, just regular, get them around the block. And, and that's an extreme example, but you would tailor it to if somebody's already maxed out, but they're not on all these different little finer points. Do you want to nasal breathe, or you find out they're getting 4 hours of sleep a night? You're going to go for the sleep because that's way more critical than the nasal breathing part. So it's just an interesting
What's
point.
interesting is it is in some sense a too many cooks in the kitchen problem, because like the benefits of from Nestor's standpoint in breathe, the benefits of nasal breathing from a physiological standpoint, and I'm not talking about athletics, I'm not talking about performance, I'm talking about just keeping your mouth shut and breathing through your nose, are fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And to the degree, and I don't do a good job of paraphrasing it without notes in the book in front of me, so I'm not going to attempt to, but just that the studies that are being done on what happens to your body when you breathe only through your mouth and what happens to your body when you breathe only through your nose, physiologically, they're not even comparable. It is so much healthier and better for you to breathe through your nose. You have to separate elite performance in any conversation. If you're talking about a plant-based diet, a carnivore diet, a raw diet, whatever it is, like whatever the thing is, the flavor of the week, you have to separate it for elite performance, because elite performance, you're now in a 0.1% of the population. And then each one of those people is going to have a completely different physiological makeup that's going to demand certain things. And then there's the mental question of what are you actually focusing on? And this might be a little more to Chris's point, but with like combat athletes, for example, learning how to breathe through your nose might not give you a performance edge in like punches per minute or something, but it might give you an edge in composure. So if you can regulate your breath better and not get into fight or flight more frequently, that doesn't, maybe you're not putting more weight on the bar, or you're not getting more punches in a minute, but you're getting this competitive edge in control and relaxation that you're not getting elsewhere. So then it's like, how do you don't, there's no way to measure that, right? So it's, but I mean, Richard, he brought up an interesting point too. It's like about sprinting, like, yeah. And Nestor would agree with this actually. If you're sprinting, abandon it. Right? Like that's not a time to try to breathe. That's a time, a sprint is a 100%. Nasal breathing is not for 100%. It's for like the 70 to 85 and maybe some very specific recovery protocols and breath hold protocols and stuff. But if you're at 100%, if someone's trying to grab your arm and lock it behind your back and you're rolling around the ground, yeah, you fucking bail, dude. Like,
right.
Now is not the time.
Totally makes sense.
Which is,
yeah, I mean, it's amazing that there's so much, with today's internet and podcasts and stuff. Like, I've learned so much with the guests that you have on, and they're fascinating because each one of them is specialists at what they're researching and have become. The type of coach that they're coming out of the background that they had to become that type of coach. And it's, I have the utmost respect for all of them, because they have so much experience in that field. So whatever they're saying is they believe it for a reason, because they've got proof, they've got data, they've got personal experience, or a combination of both. And so for me, as a casual reader and listener, I'm interested because it's something that I'm intrigued by, and I apply things. But I'm not like, oh, it's this flavor of the week and that flavor of the week. Above all else, I listen to my body. My body tells me what's working and what isn't.
It's a hard thing for people to do, too.
That just comes with over time. For me, it's from being a competitive athlete over time. I can't tell you how many races I've towed the line at and pushed my body in different sports. And so I know the feeling. For instance, I know if I'm settling into like, oh, this is the rut, this is the groove, and this is my 7:45 minute pace. So I got to crank it up a little bit if I'm going to drop a little time off of this. And I know that's where I am. Even if if it's a bad day or a good day, I know that's the cadence, that's the breathing rhythm. Like, oh, I'll settle into that all the time. Whatever it might be, whether it's on the bike. I've got tens of thousands of miles on the bike, and so that'll just tell, oh, okay, that groove, or rowing, it's like your body finds those grooves that it's familiar with. And so, but that's just time and repetition. And I think that that's what makes such great elite athletes so good, is they can do laps, with their eyes closed and be within a tenth of a second on a 400, if they want to. Like,
that's one thing that because I agree with your point 100%. The biggest thing is, what are you learning about yourself as the athlete? No matter what you're reading, what things are you implementing that are changing what you're doing? And for me, like, the nasal breathing thing was massive. It completely flipped upside down everything I thought I knew about how I was just operating. I didn't even know that alone. That was the biggest ticket. I didn't even know that I was walking around always breathing through my mouth, running always breathing through my mouth, huffing and puffing at jiu-jitsu. The clarity that I have on that from having spent the last 2 years doing it, maybe Richard Diaz is right, 100% right, and I'm just wrong. But it doesn't matter, because the payout was massive for me. It's a degree of clarity that I've gotten as an athlete that I never had as a skier, that I've never had as a soccer player, as a runner, anything. I only got it in the last 2 years from this self-experiment. And now I can tell just by what I can feel breathing. I know what's happening when I'm breathing. That's crazy. I didn't even know that before. And I can pinpoint very, very closely where my heart rate's at, which I couldn't do before, because I had no feedback on what my breathing was really doing. So you're 100% right. It's like it comes down to, like, the individual level, and what are you picking up? What's working for you? What's not? Can you eat a big breakfast and then go do a DEKA Fit, or do you get completely blown out and you got to switch it up? Well, like, what things within the confines of generally healthy and good choices are best for you as an individual person?
Right. And for me, it's interesting as a I guess I would be considered a senior athlete. I'm approaching 60, so I'm combating a whole different set of circumstances that guys in their 20s, 30s, and 40s are not.
Right.
And not as many of them. I think I'm bypassing a lot of them, because I'm like, this is one of my strongest years physically, like with a barbell, of all my weightlifting, which I haven't weightlifted my whole life. I've started weightlifting in my
3 days,
probably early 40s.
Yeah.
And yet my numbers are stronger this year than they have been with any other year, with the exception of just a couple lifts. But that's mainly due to limitations from some injury flare-ups. But everything else, like across the board, I'm a better athlete. I'm sleeping better. My nutrition is better, and all of which can improve. So in no way am I capped out on, I'm super efficient with my sleep. And there's always things. Should I be doing cold water therapy? Like, should I be doing plunges? Should I be? Yeah. There's a ton of stuff, and it's all very interesting to me. But I take it in my own due time. But I love it, because I'm just kind of defying physics in a way, like just by being fit, by 3 to 5 times a week, sometimes a little bit more, competing on a regular basis, sleeping reasonably well, eating good quality food in, like, maybe not the right amounts and maybe not in the right windows of time, whatever. I'm not super good at that. That's a package that I feel pretty darn good at. It releases stress in my life. I get a lot of joy out of competing. I meet a lot of fellow competitors that have the same joy in their life of being physically fit and happy about it. And yet there's so much at my fingertips of areas where I can absorb and tweak and improve a little 1% here, 1% there, when I'm not even like close to my potential.
Right.
And I've come so far. Like, I've built myself into a really well-rounded athlete from.
I remember us having conversations about, you sending me pictures of your food for a week and stuff, and it's been really cool to see how many things have fallen into place. And I try to communicate this to clients and friends and people that ask about just making healthier choices. It's very hard to box up this point that I'm trying to make, but just by doing over and over and over and over and over again, even if you're doing some things wrong or not to the most optimal degree, you do it. Like the thing that you're trying to get done gets done by happenstance, but it's happenstance that's a byproduct of the efforts in the same place over and over. That consistency. Like, yeah, maybe it's not. I've never counted a calorie in my life. And I don't think you have either. I think we like jokingly tried one time and it was like a horrible failure. Surprise. But like, look at how your food is working for your life. You're in the best shape. You're the strongest. You're sleeping better, more mental clarity, like all these positive things that you would have grabbed right off the shelf if you could before, but you don't know where to look. And now they're just happening. But they're happening when you look back now at the past 10 years. Because it's like you haven't missed a day.
Right.
And that's what happens.
You and I, it's probably both of our mottos, consistency is king. And even if it's just paying attention to information that's there, you know, yes. Even if you're like, I had a crappy September until the beginning of this week that just passed. It sucked. It was just like, I don't know, there was some kind of planetary alignment. There was like, physically, I just felt
retrograde.
I just felt out of, like, not in alignment with my body. Little injuries were flaring up, and little things that weren't injuries were showing up. Like, what the heck is that now? Yeah. And work was really stressful. I was getting a bunch of things piling onto me, coming out of different barrels of different guns, and so it was just a lot. And I missed my weekly attendance. Went from 6 to 5 or 5 to 4 to 3 to 2. But during that time, Jen and I went away for a nice vacation for the weekend. I brought my running shoes, didn't run because I felt like crap, didn't want to run. But just resetting, just getting away. We just drove to the Cape Cod, rented a little Airbnb and went there for the weekend. It was awesome. So resetting there naturally, and then coming back, and I still didn't want to go to the gym. I was dragging. It was just like everything was just hurting, and it was just a bummer. But I've been there before, and I know that. And when physically I'm not 100% or 95%, it really gets to me. Like, it really bothers me when I'm injured or I'm like off kilter, because I'm used to just really utilizing that time of athletics and working out to balance me. So I feel out of balance and I can't balance myself. So this past Monday, I went in and I just crushed a workout. And lately I've been adding on like DEKA frequency things. I'm trying to get compromised running in at the end. So I'll do whatever the workout is, and with a really high heart rate, as soon as I finish whatever it might have been that's on the workout, I'll dash out the door and I'll do a 200-meter sprint, and I'll come back in, and then I'll do I use a 45-pound plate, and I'll do burpees to my chest with the thing overhead to mimic the DEKA thing, and then I'll blast out the door for a 200-meter, and I'll do like 3 or 4 different things like that until I'm smoked. And I had a great workout. I'm like, okay, great. I'm back on track. Next day I was sore from all that because it had been like a while, and I had another great workout. So I just kept going, even though I was just like, I'm not quite sure about this. And then I strung together like 5 days in a row this week, and I'm back on track. And I had a really great week. And so just now I have that experience of, okay, you can have 2 or 3 weeks or you're really off kilter. And I'm starting to feel stressed because I'm like, okay, I only have X number of weeks till my little bit of taper before World Championships in November. And I got I'm running out of time. And I started to play those head games. And all it took was like 4 good workouts, 5 good workouts in a row to reset. Now I'm back on track. I had an epic week. And now I'm rolling, and I think I can roll right through. But now I can call on that experience of being derailed, not having such a good couple of weeks in the gym, and know that it's going to come back. It's not going to abandon. I'm not like suddenly off the fitness wagon. I'm going to balloon out because I'm depressed and I'm eating bags of chips, which I did eat a bag of chips, the whole bag, start to finish.
But this is an important part too for people listening. It might be that you sound like you're insane, because God forbid in 10 years you didn't work out for 3 days, right? But that's super not the point. The point is that rest is as much of a discipline as activity. And the trap that you can get into when you are a high frequency exerciser and you have a lot of things, and this is like, my hands raised, this is a problem that I struggle with all the time, is there is a point of diminishing returns where doing more actually makes you worse at what you're training for, or it puts your body in a worse position than it helps you. And when you're in the thick of it, you feel like any moment away is that's bad. That means that you're getting weaker, you're getting slower, whatever. It couldn't be further from the truth.
That was me 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's when the body recovers. That's when it gets stronger. That's why you can come back from a couple days rest and absolutely obliterate it. And you're like, oh, weird, I must have slept better. No, you didn't sleep better. You finally let your body rest for the first time ever. But it's hard in a competitive setting. I know, at least for me, like when I'm going to training, and I don't mean strength training, I strength train here, right? But when I go to training at the academy, you're with people, you're with the same people, and everyone's putting in work. And like, I get this thing that if I don't go, the people that I usually put in work with, they're going to get more work in than me. And then I'm going to come back, they're going to be better than I am, or more, it's another head game. You're playing head games with yourself when you're in the work. You're playing head games with yourself when you're out of the work. It's just learning that about yourself and how to manage that becomes an important part as an athlete of any level, to understand your own psychology so that you can give your body the best of what it needs.
Sometimes because your body is going to something's going to give if you don't give it the time.
100%.
And I've had that happen before. Like I say, 2 years ago.
And your sleep might suffer.
And that's what would happen.
And even like the bag of chips thing, sometimes you need the bag of chips. It's okay. It's so okay to do that. Because
and I've never beat myself up over the bag of chips.
No, it shouldn't.
Yeah.
When if you find yourself really busting your balls about it like that, that's when it becomes unhealthy. You should be able to live your life and live a healthy life and eat and sleep and recover in a way that supports what you love to do to the degree to which you love to do it. And that'll change a lot about those input factors. But every once in a while, you got to just pack your running shoes and not use them.
Yeah, it was the best thing. It was some good lessons that came out of it, and I'm feeling pretty good about it on the backside of it. But it was an interesting lesson, even after all these years. I realized that I do have to fold in those times, and now this is a great time. That was a perfect window to take a breather, because now I'm like, I don't know, 7 or 8 weeks out. A good 6-week block of training ahead that I really should be consistent with, and going for that. So,
well, maybe we can find a way to get
fun stuff.
Yancey on here. That would be really cool to hear a little bit about the genesis behind DEKA. And I was saying it would be cool to get Yancey to find a way to get him on here and talk a little bit about the genesis of DEKA and because it's growing a lot, and it's spreading, and it's applicable to a ton of people. So it's really cool. There'll be links in the show notes to what DEKA is, how you can find the events, sign up for the events, all that kind of stuff. Same on the YouTube in the show notes. And then it'll be cool to kind of see how you do here at World Championships in November.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm making some changes to my training to adjust to that. It's all new territory for me, but there's some tried and true methods out there that work, and I'm building on my weaknesses. And when Yancey is handing me my podium medal there, I'll say hi, and then he has to be on the podcast.
There we go. Well, I don't say this to any other guests, so I love you. And thank you for taking the time to be on here. Yeah, it's always a fun time, and we'll circle back following the event and see how you're doing.
Yeah, we'll do.
Awesome. Sweet. So that